Hello, Risk 360W students. My name is Julia Lane, and I am a Writing Services Coordinator in the Student Learning Commons in the library at SFU. And I'm making this recording to talk to you about editing and revising as skills that you are learning as a part of your course and that we will work on together when I come into the class in March. So let's jump right in. Sometimes when we think about writing, we have a tendency to think about it as sort of a straight line or as really only what happens when we're putting words down on the page. But as you can see on the slide, writing itself is actually a much bigger process than that, and one that moves in cycles and iterates. And so often it starts with some research, some idea generation, getting a sense of what we want to say. And then we start to move into pre-writing and planning, structuring, thinking about how we might say it. And then we get into actually drafting. We do some reflection. Maybe we seek out somebody to help read it and give us some feedback, like a tutor or a peer. We revise. We might realize, oh, I have a new idea, or I need some additional research. I didn't support one of my ideas well enough. And when we do that, we might have to think about how we incorporate that new research or that new idea into the text. And so then we're back into the cycle again. And since writing is a process that happens in stages like this, it makes sense for us to also approach revision in stages, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So in this workshop, we'll break down the stages into what's known as first order and second order concerns for revising, and then we'll discuss proofreading. And it's really helpful to be able to break things apart in this way, because when we don't, sometimes we end up only proofreading when what we actually meant to do was revise and edit our work. And I'll explain how those are different as we go. Before we jump into all of that, though, I do just want to take a moment to acknowledge that Gen AI is having an impact on our writing and at all of these stages. So today, many writers are incorporating Gen AI tools into their writing process across all of the stages. And sometimes that incorporation is conscious and intentional, like when we use prompt engineering to work with tools like ChatGPT. And other times it's happening without writers even being fully aware or consenting, including through the ways that companies are increasingly incorporating Gen AI into software and platforms that we already use as a part of our writing. So things like Copilot and Microsoft Word and smart email management tools in Gmail and Outlook. These tools can have benefits and drawbacks for us at each of the writing stages. So let's look at those. At the pre-writing and planning stage, many writers find it helpful to brainstorm ideas using Gen AI tools as a sounding board. This can be a useful way to dig deeply into a topic and generate questions to help you identify considerations you might otherwise have missed. However, recent research from MIT has shown that frequent use of these tools, perhaps especially in this cognitive heavy lifting stage of initial idea generation, can result in shortcuts and can result in reduced cognitive performance. So, this is a quote from a Times article that was talking about that MIT study. And they say the study divided 54 subjects 18 to 39 years old from the Boston area into three groups and asked them to write several SAT essays using OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's search engine, and nothing at all, respectively. So each group had one of those conditions. Researchers then used an EEG to record the writer's brain activity across 32 regions and found that of the three groups, ChatGPT users had the lowest brain engagement and consistently underperformed at neural, linguistic, and behavioral levels. And over the course of several months, the ChatGPT user group actually got lazier with each subsequent essay, often resorting to copy and paste by the end of the study. So we can see that in this study that the use of that tool actually resulted in less engagement with the writing process. What about at the drafting, reflection, review, and research stages? While again, Gen AI tools can perform as conversation partners, providing quick and efficient feedback in these writing stages. But one important consideration here is that Gen AI tools actually can't think. And that makes the term artificial intelligence a bit of a misleading one. Rather than thinking or offering genuine reflection, what these tools do is make predictions based on algorithms that are trained on a specific body of work. This is where we often hear the phrase garbage in, garbage out. While the information the tools is trained on may not be garbage per se, it may also not be reflective of all the kinds of considerations that experts in your field, the field of actuarial science, value. But the problem is that the tools aren't really aware of their shortcomings and they respond quickly and confidently, and they have a supportive and reassuring tone. And as a result, they can help you think that you've produced something that's more comprehensive, accurate, or effective than it actually is. And the experts in your field will be able to notice that. The easiest case in point to demonstrate this is that these tools often hallucinate or make up references that don't exist. Those references can look good and they can sound good, but if they're not actually real, they don't provide effective evidence to back up an argument. Okay, and what about at the revision stage? This is the area that we're here to talk about today. It's a common one where writers seek support from tools and have for a very long time, well before the advent of current Gen AI tools, so things like spelling and grammar checkers. Sometimes what I hear about this is, well, it's just proofreading and I need the help of these tools to produce something polished. First of all, as we're going to see in this rest of this session, revision is not just proofreading. Revision is actually a really important stage where we're doing additional thinking about our work. And then also, it is true that Gen AI tools can help to support structure, organization, and even technically correct spelling and grammar. Though it's worth noting that spelling and grammar checking isn't actually what large language models are built to do. So you're often better off using more purpose-built tools like Grammarly. However, anytime an external tool is making a suggestion to you to change your writing, and you're sure yourself why it's suggesting that change, it's possible that the revision is changing your meaning or how your text will be read by your audience in ways that you aren't aware of or in control of, and that can be concerning. It's also really important to note two big picture things about writing with Gen AI tools as overall considerations. So one, most, maybe all Gen AI tools are owned by tech companies who are profiting from your use of them. And when you feed information into these tools, you are potentially, likely, consenting to that information being used to continue training the tools and thereby sacrificing the privacy of the information and data you're using. This is a really important consideration in your context, especially because your assignment points out that fairness, discrimination, transparency, and societal impact are all core actuarial concerns. If we don't know how private for-profit companies are using the information we're giving them, we cannot ensure or be accountable to the principles of fairness, transparency, and societal impact. And if you share real people's private data with these companies, you can't actually be accountable to how that information is being used, and you have sacrificed the privacy of that data. So it's important to learn how to do the writing process without the tools in case we are in a context where we have to, because the data that we're working with can't be shared in this way. And then from a writing perspective, I just want to point out that AI does make it easier to skip the uncomfortable and effortful parts of writing, which sounds really good, but that's exactly where learning happens through writing. Planning and word choice and sentence level decisions and revision, these are where we think and we learn and we grow. Writing research has been clear that development comes from staying with those moments and not avoiding them or bypassing them. So from a learning perspective, this fits with what we know about productive struggle and desirable difficulty. When we remove that effort rather than supporting it, we actually weaken our ability to learn. And that's what that MIT study showed as well. So Just important to note that yes, writing can feel really hard, revision can feel really hard, and it's still worth doing. All right. So what am I talking about when I talk about breaking revision apart into stages? This is what we can know as strategic revision, and we can think about it in a three-step approach. In this three-step approach, the first stage is revision, the second stage is editing, and the third stage is proofreading. And I'm just going to pause here a moment so that you can read what goes into each of those stages. So as you may have noticed, we can think about this three-stage approach as sort of moving through a funnel. When we think about revision, we are really looking at the big picture and asking ourselves questions like, does this document do what it's meant to do? Is it clear? Is it organized? Does it make the connections that it needs to make? And then when we're editing, we're zooming in and we're looking at sentence level. We're thinking about our word choice. We're thinking, is there a clearer or a more elegant way to say this? Can I be more concise? And then when we're proofreading, we're zooming in even further. We're looking at every punctuation mark, the spelling of the words. We're looking for the technical mechanics and the formatting and making sure that everything is in order. And one of the reasons that it's really helpful to go step by step like this is that it helps us to avoid perfectionism. It allows us to complete a rough draft before we get into revising and to think about the big picture before we try to fix all of our commas. Sometimes what can happen when we don't do this is that we spend a whole bunch of time making a paragraph perfect, technically perfect, and then we realize we don't actually need it in the document. So it's not a great use of time. So let's think about how we do this in practice. So first order concerns are those revision concerns. They're things like argumentation. Do you have an argument? Do you need an argument? Have you taken a position? Is that position clear? Are you ensuring that the position or the argument that you're taking is resting on sound principles, or is it based on a fallacy? If it's based on a logical fallacy, it needs to be revised. You're making sure you have sufficient evidence to support the position or the argument that you're making. And you're looking at the organization and structure. A really helpful thing to help you orient yourself to this first stage of revision is to think about your overall purpose. So what are you writing and why are you writing it? Are you trying to tell a story? If so, why are you telling it? Or to whom? Are you trying to describe an activity or a process? If so, why? Are you trying to get your reader to do this activity with you? Are you trying to tell them never to do this? Are you trying to answer a question? Are you testing a hypothesis? Are you analyzing or evaluating the work of others, which is very commonly something that we're doing in scholarly writing? If so, why is it significant? What will we learn? Or are you trying to prove an argument? And if so, you need to make sure that you're taking a position and thinking about why it's important to make this argument. Another way that we can get at thinking about our purpose is to think about our audience. So who are we actually communicating to? This helps us to get out of ourselves and out of our own understanding and think about who's reading this. And often, quite literally, who is reading it is your professor, your instructor, who is a specialist in the area. And if that's the case, then you want to think about recognizing that you're writing to someone who has more expertise than you. And when you're in that context of writing, then you have to think about what does your reader expect you to know and how can you demonstrate clearly that you know it? And how much do you need to explain to them? So you don't need to explain things if they know you know it. But if they're testing to see if you know it, then you do need to explain it because otherwise you aren't showing them that what you know. If you're writing to other people who have roughly the same expertise as you, so your peers, then you can start by thinking about what knowledge do you share and what assumptions are you making or how are you coming at this that they might not be also coming at it from that same place, and that's where you need to give more explanation. And sometimes you're given assignments where you're encouraged to write to an audience who has less expertise than you. So you are taking on the position of the expert, the actuarial professional, and you're writing to a non-specialist who maybe needs to make a decision, somebody who is relying on your expertise. And so in that case, you want to be thinking about how do you start? How do you start them on common ground? So meeting them where they are and walking them into the key concepts that you need to explain, so that the reader can come along with you. And always asking yourself, what do they need to know to understand what I'm saying to them? This can be a really useful thing to also bring in as you're writing and when you're revising, to read through your text and try to imagine. It's almost like you put on glasses and you say, okay, I'm now no longer me. I'm reading it as my audience. And how does it land with me? Where am I clear? Where am I unclear? Where do I need more or less information? And that will help you to do some effective revision, organizing, and structuring in your paper. And argumentation often is something we say a lot in scholarly writing, but we don't always explain what we mean by argumentation. And so I really like this slide, the image. This is Tolman's model of argumentation. And it just helps you to see that effective arguments, are actually built of multiple parts. So you can see that what we have on the slide here is we have claim and data, and they're sort of sitting on like a seesaw. And we want them to balance. We want our claim, what we're trying to say, or the position that we're taking, to be equally as strong as the evidence or the data that we have to back it up. It's so this in business writing, argumentation is sometimes talked about as persuasion. And part of how we persuade our audience of something is by taking a clear position and providing the information that they need to be convinced of that perspective. In order to write persuasively, you need to know what your central claim is and how it's related to your evidence. It can be helpful to think of your evidence, what you find out from your research, as the information that helps to reinforce your claim, which is the central point you're trying to convince your reader of. You may have lots of different kinds of data and evidence and information, but the most persuasive writing focuses on one strong, clear central claim. On the slide here, you also see the words qualifier and rebuttal. The rebuttal is the place where you think of reasons why someone might argue against your central claim, and then you respond to them. This can be an especially crucial part of persuasive business writing because you don't want your reader to think that you're simply ignoring possible objections or issues. You need to address them directly. Qualifiers are ways that you adjust your claim to be more specific and realistic. For example, you might say something like, in light of this cost-benefit analysis, the most profitable course of action is this. Both in light of and the most profitable are qualifiers here. You aren't claiming to present the best course of action, but rather the most profitable, the best from a specific perspective, in a particular context. Effectively qualified claims are often most clear, specific, and persuasive for a reader. Your rebuttals can help you determine the best way to qualify your claim because they can help you to focus on both objections to your argument and how you address those objections. When you're revising your work, you need to look at your argument again and make sure that it still works with what you've written. Sometimes our arguments shift as we write, and as we continue to clarify our ideas. Focusing on how clear, consistent, and persuasive our arguments are when we're revising is one of the most strategic ways to go about revising our work. So another thing that I've talked about quite a bit in the revision stage is organization. And one of the best tools that I know for helping you to revise for organization is to make a reverse outline. And it's a really helpful way to see the structure of your writing. So you make a reverse outline once you have a draft, and then you break that draft back down into an outline, into structure. So you take only the topic sentence from each paragraph and your overall argument, and you put those into a new document. And then you look at that and you ask yourself questions like, does this structure make sense? Is there anything missing or in the wrong place? Am I making any big leaps where this idea is really not connected to the next one? And there's a link on the slide that I will also share out that you can use to see how you might make a reverse outline. And then as we zoom into more editing, we think about level of the paragraph. So looking at coherence. Coherence is the sense of the whole when all the sentences in a piece of writing add up to create a complete picture. So one of the ways that I sometimes think about coherence is almost like paper dolls, that our sentences each they have a hand reaching out to hold on to the sentence that came before and a hand reaching out to hold on to the sentence that's coming after. And we want to make those connections really clear for our reader. And using transition words really help to move the reader from one idea to the next. And then as we zoom down to the bottom of the funnel, we have proofreading. So again, before you proofread, you want to make sure that you revise and edit. You take care of those first order concerns first. You get away from your paper for a bit, even if it's only 5, 10, 15 minutes, so that you can try to see it with some fresh eyes. Sometimes it can be really helpful to actually print it out and look at it in hard copy, especially if you've been working on the computer so you can see it in a new way. Part of how we make our proofreading most effective is by doing the revising and editing so that we've deleted things we don't need. We're not carefully proofreading stuff that we're actually just going to get rid of. And a really great strategy is keep track of the things that you know, common mistakes that you make. Make a list of them and then look for those things in your own writing. So we're going to talk about this more when I come into the class on March 2nd, and I hope that this is a great introduction to help you prime your thinking about what we're doing when we're revising and editing our own writing. And I just want to also let you know that the SLC is available to support you with all of these stages of your writing and your revising and your editing and your proofreading. We have both virtual and on-campus one-on-one consultations where you can talk to somebody live in real time. You can also get feedback asynchronously. So you submit a paper and a tutor will read it and send you back written feedback through writeaway.ca. And we have lots of writing and time management and language learning resources on our website that you can do at your own pace to support you. So I look forward to meeting you in person, and I wish you happy writing and happy revising and happy editing and happy proofreading. Thank you and have a great day.